Hey gang, welcome to the Modscast. Hope you're all doing well. I got a request to talk about Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. A lot going on between the UK elections yesterday, the Comey hearings and stuff. So there's a lot to talk about, but I thought I'd do this first, my take or my thoughts on Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, and I'll get into some other stuff that's related while we're talking. But first off, on the accord itself, it seems to me a lot like an empty gesture. There's a lot of posturing and people saying and feeling good about things, but what will it actually do? We've been in a society for a long time that says things that sound good. It's all sound bites and clips, but nobody ever examines really closely what these things do, whether it's a policy or a position. And I understand as a teacher of English, and I know symbolism and stuff, that there are important gestures that we make, symbolic gestures that send messages. There's no denying that. But that being said, really expensive gestures that do nothing or that may even make things worse are problematic. Now, that's not to say that this would make it worse, but the amount of money that it would involve, and I'll post a link to a pretty good video on this below, versus the amount of return seems to me problematic. It doesn't seem to do much of anything. I think the measurement is 0.02 degrees Fahrenheit or something. If everybody does what they're supposed to do, and I think with countries like China and India, not only can you probably bet they won't, it's unfair to ask them to. I mean, they're trying to bring their massive populations up to first world status, and the way they're doing that is with fossil fuels, and you want to tell them that they should scale back and not have the things that we have. I just think that's problematic. Now, but the climate change agreement itself, I think Trump was right to pull out of it, but I don't think it's that he doesn't care about the environment. The person who posted it said to me, I think he did it because it's not good for Americans, and he's right. I mean, it asks America to do things and make sacrifices that won't make a difference in terms of jobs, money, that kind of thing, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, let me make off, first of all, it's worth framing the whole debate. Those of you who know me kind of know where I am on the anthropogenic global warming question. Obviously, I don't deny human activity undoubtedly affects the environment, and we need to be responsible about it, okay? I mean, students, when I have this, sophomores, they'll be like, oh, you're just saying we should litter. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is we just don't care about it. It's ridiculous. I firmly believe we need to be responsible stewards of the world we inhabit and the one that we want to leave to our children, okay? Framing this debate, it is not a debate between people who don't give a crap about the environment and those who do. That's the sort of bipolarization that we fall into. The argument is not about whether or not mankind is affecting the environment. The question is how much and what can we do about it, right? Practically and realistically. So a couple things from the outset of this. I mean, when I was a kid, it was that there was an ice age coming, and now it's that things are getting warmer, and right, that this is the problem. Greenhouse gases. We're going to cause an ice age, and now they're going to cause a warming period, okay? And again, it's a fundamental principle that science changes. I don't have a problem with that. Our positions evolve and change over time. But that's one of the problems that I have. So this whole notion that the science is settled, okay, is always a red flag to me. Science, by definition, is never settled. Scientific conclusions are always open to reevaluation in light of the revealing of new evidence. I mean, that's just a given. If it's not, it ceases to be science. That becomes a problem. It becomes dogma. I mean, if you're saying, no, this is set, there's no discussion, and you want to institute policy based on that, well, again, that sounds an awful lot like dogma. And if you look at, say, the email scandal from the University of East Anglia, you can Google it, where you had some of the initial global warming scientists saying to one another, well, we're not going to give them our research if they're just going to disprove it. Well, wait a second, my understanding is that's kind of what science is, right? I mean, isn't that what we do? We just share so that people can see it, which is a strange thing. Then there's the whole, as a language guide, the whole name change thing constantly, right? So it's global warming, and then when it doesn't get warmer, it's just climate change, and then it's extreme weather. Now, again, this isn't to say that this stuff isn't going on, but the fact that you're constantly moving the goalposts or constantly changing the terms when it doesn't do what you want, instead of going, maybe I don't have this exactly right. I mean, that is always a red flag to me, and something that I my antenna go up, okay? Because I'm like, well, hold on. You can't just change the terms of the definitions in order to keep your truth. We have to re-examine the information. Then there's the other things. The idea that they wanted to use RICO statutes, and you can Google this too, to prosecute so-called deniers of climate change. Prosecuting people for having a different scientific opinion, again, is pretty scary stuff. Again, that's you don't punish people for having a different opinion. They used to do that when, say, you said that you didn't believe in transubstantiation, and the Catholic Church would prosecute you, or you did believe that in transubstantiation, and so the Protestants would come after you, or whatever. Okay, or you, denied the Trinity or something like that. I mean, that's dogmatic stuff. Okay, when you're prosecuting somebody for having a different opinion, or if you said the world wasn't created by God, and then the church said, well, we're going to prosecute you for that or something. And that's not even scientific stuff, which is supposedly, again, completely objective and not governed by the same rules which govern the divine when we talk about having a belief system, which is unverifiable, right? So, I mean, that's a problem. And then you add to that the idea that people say, oh, denying the anthropogenic global warming is like denying the Holocaust. Okay, this is the falsest comparison imaginable. It's obviously an extremist. I'm noting that a lot of people aren't, there's people who aren't arguing that. But it's worth sifting through the noise, because one is historical fact, okay? I've been to Bergen-Belsen and other places, okay? And one is scientific theory, a hypothesis based on computer models projecting outward. However accurate they may be, it hasn't happened yet, this has happened, okay? So that comparison is just so ridiculous to me. Again, I don't understand how anyone can make that comparison and expect to be taken seriously. And the extremity to which someone's willing to go to refute an argument is usually a pretty good indicator to me that they're not that sure of it, okay? That they themselves know that there's not that much there, okay? Not solid, okay? Clearly there's things we need to be doing now and we should be doing now. I'm not denying that by any stretch of the imagination, but it's important to remember that when somebody makes absurd comparisons to try and demonize someone who has an opposing view, especially in the case of some of these climatologists, these are good. I mean, there's a couple physicists and a number of very, very prominent, intelligent people who have said, look, this is not the problem they're making it out to be. They didn't say it's not a problem, but they said it's not the problem they're making it out to be, and not a problem to institute trillion-dollar policies based on, okay? So at any rate, we'll come back. Now, then there's the famous 97% number, or whatever it was, right, that scientists agree, okay? A lot of studies talk about how debunked that is, how erroneous the study was, but none of that even matters, because Einstein said it best, and there's a climate, I'll try and find him and put him in the link. There's a climate scientist who pointed out that a group of scientists wrote a letter to Einstein telling him he was wrong, and they were like, look, we have all these people who say you're wrong. And he said, it's a beautiful statement, Einstein said, what do you need all those people for? You only need one. See, science, it doesn't come from a group, it doesn't come from consensus, it comes from the facts. And when one person makes a discovery, whether it's, Newton or Einstein or whoever, right? You don't need numbers, you need the truth. It's not about a consensus, okay? Science is, if you look at most great scientific changes, it came from one guy going, hey, I wonder about this, or, I wonder about that, and pushed it and checked it and tested it out. Darwin, you name it. So that's a crazy thing. More than all that, though, is this weird thing, and I'll get into this towards the end a little bit, but if you had done all this research and discovered that we as a species were going to destroy our world, our habitat, okay, not blow the planet up, but make it unlivable for future generations, wouldn't you want to be wrong? I mean, wouldn't you go to every scientist you know and go, oh my God, look at this. I think we're destroying the planet. Can you please run this and run your numbers and test it against everything you have and show me that I'm wrong, because I'm really scared. Okay? And yet there's this virulent opposition to even talking about the fact that that theory might be wrong. That's just strange to me. I mean, not only is it ascientific, even if you were objective, it would be one thing if you were truly scientific and were dispassionate and said, here's what it looks like, let anybody else have at it and prove it. Okay, that would be one thing. But not only are they not doing that, but they're virulently opposing anybody even suggesting something other than that. Okay, now that's just weird, don't you think? I mean, and by the way, I don't suggest any of these people are evil or anything like that. I'm a student of human nature, literature, human history, psychology, that kind of stuff. I get it. We become wedded to the things. And as I've said many times in my class, truth becomes a function of desire. We see what we want to see. But if you want to see, and I'll get to this a bit at the end, if you want to see that we're destroying the world, why would you want that view of humanity, right? That, wouldn't you want someone to go, no, look, here, you forgot to carry the one, we're okay, we got to get better about this stuff, but it's not really going to kill us, okay? Another argument surrounding this comes all the time, not so much anymore, but for the longest time it was, well, big oil, right? It's all the money, right? Big oil just wants to keep the science down. But that argument has to be thrown out the window. The notion that one side is in it for the money and the other is in it for saving polar bears on the high moral ground. It's ridiculous, okay? First of all, polar bear populations, they're not doing as bad as everyone said. Ice caps, yeah, polar caps are getting smaller. Antarctica, I think, has record ice growth. I'd have to check on it, but I mean, it's growing. So again, these things are back and forth, but the key point here is green energy has gotten more government subsidies and handouts than anything in recent memory, billions and billions of dollars. Okay, it's not exclusively a big oil. There's money on one side and altruism and goodness on the other. Okay, there's money on both sides. Okay, both people are greedy. We all know that. So throw that one out the window in terms of the argument. All right, and I'm sure most of you probably have. But the problem is, of course, that science becomes political. Okay, when science becomes political, that's a problem. Now, there are certain issues that need to be looked at, okay? So in other words, politics has to do with the moral conduct of your society, so you do have to ask yourself questions, okay? And you do need to rein in and solve problems of companies polluting and things like that. You've got to make sure that you're clear and going, here's what we're gonna do, okay? There's no question. But the one thing you have to do is strike a balance, because what you want, the crucial thing, and to me this is it as kind of as a classical liberal, okay? People need to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because they're made to do it, okay? Now, you need, as I mentioned, rules and laws in order to make sure that you can make an example of the people who don't do it. That's fine. But that's a balancing act. And if you start over-regulating and forcing things, okay, then you start creating resentment and you start treating your population like children who can't choose the right thing. Now, this gets into other issues for another video, other videos, I should say, about how we're raising kids, about what we're teaching them about responsibility and things like that. But the crucial thing here is that this policy has become political, and by political I mean corporate political, like money political, okay? So there's huge money in both. If you try to get a grant for science and it's skeptical of global warming, you won't even get in the door. They won't even consider you. Most of these scientists will tell you that you're blacklisted if you even try it. Okay, again, blacklists, those are ideological things, right? When you can't get government money because of an opinion, or when you're blacklisted from a university or something like that because of your difference of opinion, that's, I mean, look, it's wrong in the humanities. Obviously, it's wrong anytime we see it, okay? But we used to see it. We certainly saw it with the communists, say, in the 50s and stuff like that in the Red Scare, okay? But in science, really? Okay, if your science is good, you don't give a crap what the other guy's science says. You're more than willing to let him. Your job is not to make him look bad. Let him do that himself. If he brings his science up and it doesn't stack up, let him do it himself. I mean, that's my thing on it, okay? And the other thing, the crucial thing, and this has a lot to do with my whole worldview, okay? I'm a firm believer in that we choose not to cause suffering now for the sake of imagined suffering that we think might happen in the future. There was a show, The Leftovers on HBO, and at one point they asked this woman, okay, there's two twins. If you kill one of them, the other one will grow up and cure cancer. What would you do? Okay, it's a tricky question. But as tempting as it is to go, look, I can save all of these lives if I just kill this one kid. But you don't know. How do you know? I mean, it's all the things you don't know, right? I'm all about recognizing humility. Mankind thinks we can control all of these things. Even now, it seems, the weather, the one thing we used to all agree we couldn't control. Which, again, doesn't mean we don't try, okay? But But the choice here is between, do I make this choice now that's in front of me and choose to let this thing go that might cause more suffering in the future, even if I think it'll cause goodness. I can't know that. But what I'm asked about is a moral issue right now. Do I kill this child and enable this one to go solve cancer? Well, how do you know that this kid won't use experiments on human beings to solve cancer or also become a tyrant? Who knows, right? There's just so many unknowns. But making the assumption, because the real question for us is the moral question right now, okay? So finding a way to address our concerns about the climate has to also be tempered with the reality that to put people in the coal business, whole families, you're talking about real suffering inflicted on people for a hypothetical theory. And I'm always leery of that. I just think fear, okay, you never do anything good in terms of instituting policies when you're afraid, okay? You look at the internment of the Japanese Americans in the Second World War, okay? When you're afraid, you have to be very, very careful. You may do things that appear to be out of fear, but you have to make sure they're not out of fear, okay? Because when you operate out of fear, you don't make good choices. Now, I don't mean instinct. Obviously, it's a good choice to get out of the way of a moving train. I'm talking about instituting policies for things you can't be sure, okay? If you know, for example, you're going to get killed, or you know that a certain type of conduct is more likely to cause, diseases or something like that, okay? Even though it's not guaranteed, you don't know you're going to get cancer if you smoke or something, it's a good idea not to smoke, okay? That's a good thing, all right? But here you're talking about choices for other people, right? Inflicting suffering on other people for a theory that you think might come to pass. Okay? No matter how sure you are, scientists, as good as they are, they don't know the future. And you're talking about real suffering now for a hypothetical in the future. Now, again, all of this isn't to say that we don't need to be responsible and really examine our energy policies and find ways to do it. But we cannot be operating out of fear. Okay. On one side, they'll go, oh, you can't let fear of terrorists make you change how you conduct yourself. Okay, but you can let fear of polar bears dying or sea levels rising cause you to crush an entire industry or to invest $1 trillion. That doesn't make sense either. You shouldn't let fear make you do anything. There's a thing called prudence, right, which is to look ahead and have some wisdom about how we do it. Okay, but that's very different from operating out of fear. And so, again, when people use fear, when they deny counter-argument, especially in a scientific setting, those kinds of things, those put my antenna up, as I said, where I go, well, hold on a sec, what are you trying to hide here? Let's just have the discussion. When science becomes dogma, scientism, and a couple people have written and spoken about this at great length. I can refer links if you want them. This notion of science becoming a kind of religion that becomes dogmatic. Science is real. Yeah, I know science is real, and science is also really open to all new things because science is a project which knows it doesn't know everything. Okay, by definition, science is never closed or settled. It can't be. Okay, now, the assumed project of empirical science, and we can do this in another video going back to the scholastics and the founding of the Royal Society and stuff in Western civilization, has been the founders of the Royal Society in London in the 18th century said, basically, Spratt writes, hey, we're going to build this pile of experiments. And the idea was that future generations would build on it, which is exactly what we've done. Now, the underlying assumption of that, never really stated, but is that, eventually, right, we could unlock the mysteries of the universe. Okay? That's, if you think that's knowable. Now, nobody says that. Nobody ever really expects it to happen today, right? But the great writers of that period and subsequent ones have understood that the very dangerous pride that comes along with that. The more you know, the more you think you can control. And are you going to let your pride in thinking you know the future because your computers, which you made, okay, can predict this thing, predict some kind of disaster? You're willing to make people suffer now? Okay, and now you can make the argument, as you do in the case of the twins and the cancer curing. Well, if a few people suffer now, billions don't suffer later. Okay, maybe. So you're trying to say you think we're the savior of billions. My philosophy is that, well, we're supposed to be the savior of the person right in front of us, first and foremost. Okay, we control what we can. We try to be better about those things in order to prevent it. But the world's full of suffering. If we cause suffering now in order to avoid imagined suffering in the future, I'm more concerned with what we're doing now. And at the end of it, I guess what troubles me the most about it, and this is a topic I'll close with this for a different day, but is that the climate change thing, this idea that we're a plague on the planet, it speaks to a far greater problem, I think, in Western civilization, is that there's a kind of self-loathing and resentment in that. We're not perfect. We're screwed up. We're very good at getting things wrong, but we're also very good at fixing them, and we have proven that, particularly in the Anglosphere and in the Western world, okay, at improving things and making them better. Nobody said we were perfect, nor were we supposed to be, as most of the great writers and whatnot will talk about, and artists understood that. And that self-loathing is far more dangerous to me, because it bespeaks a kind of resentful mindset. And I think, to me, the big war in the world right now is between those who are in a position of gratitude and those who are in a position of resentment. And that's something we can talk about later, but I think it informs just about everything. Long and the short on the climate accord, I think Trump was right to pull out. I'm not a fan of empty gestures that look good but cost a bunch of money and don't actually do anything. Politicians are largely doing that so that they can stand up the next time they're up for election, or stand in front of crowds and receive adulation for, hey, I stood with this thing. And they don't have to stick around long enough, because nobody looks beyond a tweet or something like that for someone to go, okay, but what did it actually do, right? Like, how many jobs did it cost? And then they sure as heck don't have to worry about, what is it, 2100, when the projected idealized 2-degree drop is supposed to have happened. They're never gonna have to answer for that, right? So it's very easy for them to stand there and say that. So the idea of getting caught up in gestures instead of going, okay, but what does it really mean? We need to get past the sound bites, the tweets, right? So everyone's like, oh, Trump pulled out of the climate accord, he hates the climate. Okay, no, that's not it. And by the way, I should have said this at the outset. Those of you who know me know I was a never Trumper. I'm not a fan. I got a lot of problems with him. I'm a fan of the American system, and we can talk about that some other time, but I'm not, those of you who know me know, I'm not a Trump fan. So I want to be clear on that. But I think the decision was the right one, in my opinion, because again, empty gestures. Look, we're doing more through shale, getting better shale practices and things like that to reduce our carbon signature. Okay, we're doing a ton of that. And we have the luxury to, because we're a first world nation. We've created the highest living standard in the history of the world. But as I mentioned, China and India, they don't have that luxury. And who are we to tell them, hey, you can't get up to our level unless you do it by these green means that'll cost you all this money and that are unworkable on a large scale right now. We have no right to tell them that. We don't. I just don't feel comfortable with it. So I think he made the right choice. Some things I think he does right. Other things I think he does colossally stupidly. But that won't surprise anyone who knows me either. All right. That's about it for this installment. Hope you enjoyed it. Click like, share it, and remember, doing right's more important than being right. Thanks for watching. Cheers.